Afternoon. How is everybody?
Doing well.
Y'all are our 14th, but I'm quite certain you're right at the top of what we're going to hear for today. We are excited to be uplifted by whatever you're going to talk to us about. I'm Rita McCann, and I'm still in Huntsville, Alabama, and I will let my colleagues introduce themselves.
And I'm Tandy McConnell, and I'm still in Columbia, South Carolina.
And I'm Mike Miles. I'm still in Birmingham, but I didn't get a chance to tell you that yesterday. But I have before, because Ms. Nolan has invited me to your classroom for district finals, state finals, now national finals. So I can't be a member of this class yet. She's going to have to send me somewhere for remedial learning or something. But if she sends me, I'll go. Every time I've seen y'all, it's been so much fun, and y'all have been wonderful. So I believe we may just possibly have saved the best for last. We're glad to see you.
Tell us who you are.
This is Unit 2 from Kingsway Christian School. I'm Gabby Ware.
I'm Derek Threlkeld.
I'm Ariana Jones.
And I'm Ava Lunsford, and our teacher is Mrs. Nolan.
To see you today. And I guess you've already figured out we're going to do question 2. And while I got you, you're shocked. Okay, take a deep breath while I'm reading the question, and then you'll be all ready to go. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson said that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. From what sources do the people derive the right to establish government? How is the consent of the governed related to the concept of popular sovereignty? Does natural rights philosophy justify a right to revolution? Why or why not? Why might the principles and practices of self-government contained in the Declaration of Independence have been considered radical at that time? You may begin.
Our unit believes that the right to consent is an unalienable right, therefore elucidating the impression that this right is God-given. Furthermore, the American people derived this right from the Declaration of Independence itself. For example, the colonists used this right to first establish a government under the Articles of Confederation and ultimately one under the Constitution. Relatedly, the Constitution also mentions the idea of the consent of the governed in several instances, specifically in Article 7, which states, "The ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states so ratifying the same." This passage expresses that the people must ratify the Constitution, which implies the principle of the consent of the governed. Additionally, this idea originally stems from the thinking of natural rights philosophers such as Locke and Hobbes, as well as the governments of ancient Rome and Greece. This is a significant principle in our government.
Consent of the governed is the principle that the government's authority is derived from the consent of the people over which the government is organized. Conjointly, popular sovereignty is the consent that the government is subject to the will of the majority. These concepts are closely related in 3 main ways. Firstly, and most evidently, the consent of the governed is a vital component to the idea of popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty needs the consent of the governed to function properly. By definition, one notion involves the other, and popular sovereignty would not simply be plausible without the consent of the governed. Secondly, both principles are derived from the ideas of social contract philosophers such as Locke, Hobbes, and Rousseau. These philosophers crafted the concepts of the consent of the governed and popular sovereignty over 200 years ago, yet they are extremely relevant even today. Lastly, in both concepts, the people hold both none and all the power. By this, we mean that the people's consent gives the government authority, but the government and law still rule the people. This is a common thought in both principles.
Our group believes that natural rights philosophy justifies the right to revolution. This is supported by natural rights philosopher John Locke's findings in 2 treatises of government. In this book, he establishes natural rights, or the idea that everybody has certain God-given freedoms, which Locke believes to be life, liberty, and property. Locke also writes that if government should restrict these rights, the people are entitled to revolution. Furthermore, John Locke once said, whenever legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property or the people, or to reduce them under slavery, under arbitrary power, they put themselves in a state of war with the people. They are thereupon absolved from any further obedience. The American Revolution is a perfect example of this to revolution under natural rights philosophy. According to the Declaration, Britain had created a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, while having the direct object that establishes one of an absolute tyranny over these states. These injuries and usurpations include the Quartering Act, harming or killing colonists, and the abdication of colonial government. These examples restrict life, liberty, and property, giving the American settlers a right to revolution.
Based on history, our group believes that the principles and practices of self-government in the Declaration were considered radical for several reasons. In the past, it was customary to have a traditional government. Knowing this, it was a drastic change to all of the citizens and their welfare for principles like the consent of the governed and popular sovereignty to be in the Declaration. This document states that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, driving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This was a radical change to the normal government other countries had. Additionally, the Declaration was considered radical because it gave citizens much more freedom. As citizens of Great Britain, they only had the rights of Englishmen, whereas the Declaration gave them many more rights. The Declaration of Independence introduced the concept of self-government to the colonists, thus creating a drastic change in society. We are now ready for your follow-up questions.
When you talk about revolution, you have the right to revolution when people are oppressed and they're not being allowed their civil liberties. Do you think that kind of thing can happen now, or has our country adapted to ways for protest and political change without having revolution?
I would say that our government is set up in a way where it is very hard for the government to become abusive to the point of revolution, but it still can be possible for any government to become oppressive. So I think that we still could be oppressed to the point of revolution today in our country.
What would it take? What would it take? What would make you or your parents go to the streets? What would it take for y'all to go to a march? What issue? I'm a fairly socially conscious person, I think, and I've been to some Black Lives Matter rallies to be supportive because I had, I cared about what they were trying to say. But I don't know that many things that would drive me to the street to march, but obviously some people do. What right would you have to lose? What privilege that you have now? Like, this won't happen, but I'm trying to give an example. If you got to be 16 and they said, yeah, I'm sorry, but we're going to change the driving age to 18. I mean, I'm trying to give you an example. What would it take for you to be angry enough about some right of yours being taken away to make you want to go to the street and march?
Personally, I would say whenever somebody would try to take away me to express my religion or something that really connects me to something that I just love so much, something like that would I feel like that would drive me over the top and several other people, because that's our way of expressing ourselves and something that we can't really live without.
Yeah, I agree with my colleague Ariana. Being able to express your religion is like something that is very like passionate for people, and especially like me, like I would love to be able to do that, but if someone would take it away, it would be like very like I feel like I was controlled, and it would just make me feel like I'm not in a safe and protected government area.
I think that
Go ahead.
I think that if they just took away the right to express yourself in general, because that's how we mostly make changes to the government at all. If they're abusing their power, we use that to say, hey, we don't like how you're using your power, and it's how we make change in our government. So I think if they took away our freedom to do that, it would mess up the whole system.
I agree with all of my colleagues, and I would personally say that freedom of speech, for sure. And an example of this would be a case that is going before the Supreme Court very soon of somebody who did not make a varsity cheerleading squad, so posted something on Snapchat negative about her school.
Yeah.
And the school suspended her. And I would say that she had every right to post that. And personally for me, that freedom being taken away from me, that would drive me to protest.
I'd love to have a
Yes,
whole
bef-
period just to discuss that. Go ahead.
I realize I need to let Dr. McConnell go, but I've got to ask you this. Isn't there a difference, though, between a revolution and a protest?
I would say that there is, and that a protest is more on a specific issue, whereas a revolution is more of an overall abuse of power.
Yes, adding on to that, a revolution is something that I feel is more extreme than a protest, because a protest is simply them saying their mind and saying what they think is right. As a revolution, I feel is going further than a protest, in my opinion.
You told us about that the governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. What are the just powers that he was talking about? And can you give me some examples of unjust powers?
Could you rephrase the question, please?
I'll try. You told us that, and you were quoting, of course, that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. And I was wondering, what are those just powers? And I wondered if you could give me some examples of powers that are not just, that governments ought not have.
Both.
I-
Go ahead.
In my opinion, the just powers that we were talking about was whenever the government gives their opportunity and their rights of saying what they believe, and then same with us, our speech and everything that we have. I feel like that's the power that was talking about.
Then how about this? Is requiring you to wear a mask when you're in public, is that among the just powers of a government?
I personally would say that it is, because it is to support and promote the common good, which is one of the main purposes of the government, in my opinion.
And how does the
To
government
add
require-
on to what,
Go ahead.
sorry, to add on to what Gabby was saying, they're also trying to just like protect us and make sure that we are safe, so that they are promoting the common good.
So you're saying so if a government asks you to do something inconvenient, like wearing a stinking mask, which nobody likes doing, but if it's for the common good, if it's for the common good, then it's within those just powers. What if the government requires you to get a vaccine? Would you put it in that same category? Would that challenge it a little bit?
I would say, in my opinion, that I don't think that's within their powers, within their just powers, because some people have their rights of what they think it's not, of how they don't want to get it, because people think that they don't know what's in it and all of the effects that it could have in forcing someone to do something like that can evidently be harmful in the end, I feel is to...
Let me interrupt you. You're absolutely right. You're totally right. But I'm just going to push you on the logic here. The logic is it's for the common good. And so if you get the vaccine, you'll probably be fine if you get it or not, but you might protect your grandmother by your getting it. And so common good is there a different common good that approaches there, or is it just shots are different?
I feel like it also goes against some people's like religion though too. So that is like a challenging problem that we have to think, because it is promoting the common good by keeping people safe. But at the same time, it's going with like being able people to be able to express their religion. It's going against that, because
But in 2 seconds, does religion give you a right to not support the common good?
I would say that that's kind of a gray area that laws can get into, where the freedom of religion versus promoting the common good happens. But I would say that in this case, promoting the common good would probably prevail over freedom of religion.
Great response, great discussion. That was a totally unfair question, and you handled it marvelously.
By the way, now you're ready for the legislature.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good analogy there.
That was a great analysis of that. That was a great analysis of all those problems. That was
And the gray area was a perfect answer.
Yeah, it was. I'm not taking my turn. I'm joining the conversation with them. Of all the things that people your age, as opposed to mine, would protest against, losing your right to practice your religion and sticking up for a classmate whose right was taken away, are two pretty darn good things, to be upset about. It wasn't something like raising the drinking age or outlawing this or that or raising the driver's license age. It was sticking up for a friend and having the right to practice your religion. I'd take those two all day long. That's two pretty good ones. And sometimes some people feel like, I always wonder about that. Tandy, I'd love to talk to you. Tandy's wife is a pastor. I would love to talk to her sometime about examples she's seen where people aren't really quite free. Well, a lot of places, some denominations, some faiths, women are not welcome to be pastors. In some states and some denominations, including my own at the moment, same-sex couples aren't allowed to serve in the clergy and do things like that. So this is not a hypothetical. This is, Rita, this is a real thing. You have to handle cases all the time where people's rights are being taken away from them. And those are two that would make me pretty upset if that happened.
And I want to tell y'all about something you may not know yet. And by the way, your responses were all terrific. But when you said that about having a right not to take a COVID shot, I don't know if Jane is old enough to remember this, but I know that Mike and I are. But when we were in the first grade, they lined us up class by class by class.
Polio vaccine.
And gave us a little sugar cube that had medicine in it and told us to take it. And nobody asked me if it was okay. And I'm not sure my mother and daddy did anything but sign a permission slip. And I don't think they questioned the permission slip. They lined us up like little cattle and gave us all a sugar cube. It had polio medicine in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure they knew for certain whether it was safe. They did know they didn't want us to get polio. So it may be that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they can say for absolute certain that COVID vaccine was safe. Right now, all we know is we got to get people to quit dying. And I'm not pressing one way or the other. I've been very fortunate. I haven't been sick, but Mike has. I guess the reason I'm saying that is there were two different instances in my grade school era where we had to take polio and something else medicines.
Trying to remember what it was.
Tetanus.
Maybe
and now they just give them to you as a little tiny baby when you go to the pediatrician, and it's just part of what you do. You go to the pediatrician, you get a shot. So so I guess what I'm pointing out to you is one of these days, it may not be something where we all have to harangue so much about whether it's our right or not, but it is right now. So, but I loved what you had to say, and I loved your responses. Dr. McConnell, I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Don't you love hearing us old people talk on about how it used to be? But yeah, great job. Great. Using the case, I can't remember the girl's name, but the girl who got into a snit because she didn't make the varsity cheerleading squad and did what we all do. She dropped the F-bomb a few times, and it was, so the Supreme Court will decide whether the school board has any business at all censoring her perfectly normal teenage emotional responses. And that's a problem I would have never gotten into because I've never ever said anything on what was it on
Instagram.
Instagram. So I'm not ever going to get in trouble on Instagram because I don't even know how to use it. But Yeah, if I got in trouble every time I said something untowards, I'd be in trouble all the time. So so that was a great example, great case. That's going to set case law that will follow you guys for a very long time. So, you know, the trouble you get into when you're in college will be determined by this case. And what you can say in college will be determined by this case.
Dr. McConnell told us
Be
a
freedom
story.
of speech.
Yeah, Dr.
Sorry, Mike.
McConnell told us a story a little while ago. He was out for his run one day and tried to move over to let some people get by, and he stepped off the road and broke his foot. And in an interest to increase everyone's vocabulary, he said some words that little 3-year-old had probably never heard before, but she's heard them now, I guess. So he's always interested in stretching her mind. Tandy, you want to say one more thing to him? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I'm glad to do it. Happy to do it. I've never heard Ms. Nolan's class one time where I didn't learn something, and y'all did it again today. This was fun. Stacy, you're the best. Thank you so much for this. This was fun.
Thank you. Thank you
Y'all be
guys for
careful.